He's either going to start with right, okay, or so.
Here we have the Edelbrock carburetor. We thought, cheers Steve. And it's nice to know you pay attention to what we're doing. So we've got Edelbrock 500 CFM carburetor here. Carburetor we use on all of our engines, obviously when they're not fuel injected. And today we thought we'd show you how to change the primary needles and jets. If you're buying the kit from us, it's what we do before we send them out, so it's already done for you for the engine size you state when you order them. And we just thought, which we're a little bit against, aren't we, Steve, but we'll do an unboxing.
It was your idea.
Well, you know.
I hold no responsibility.
As you hear. So, in the box, we've got the gaskets we need to install the carburetor to the inlet manifold, and the one for the air filter as well, and the threaded rod for the air cleaner to bolt to, blanking plug for the rear vacuum port on the carburetor, which is not used, and a couple other little bits which I don't think we use either. So, yeah, that's the so. Your installation instructions, which also come with a DVD. I have watched bits of it. Really the best thing to do, if I'm honest with you, is to phone us up and have a chat with us, and we'll talk you through anything you're not sure of. And then the bit we're really interested in, the carburetor. So, pop this out of the bag here. This is the back of the carburetor where that blanking plug goes, just in this port here. So the breathers on all of our setups, we actually breathe to the base of the air cleaner, or better still, the base of our power plenum, which gives much better vacuum for scavenging crankcase pressure. Carburetor itself, we've got the primary ports here and the secondaries here. On the front, we've got two mixture screws, and we've got several vacuum ports. This one, again, we supply a blank for blanking off. This port here, the lower right one, I'm going from memory here, but I'm pretty certain that is the constant vacuum, which we generally do not use unless you're on something like a Land Rover 101 forward control that has a vacuum operated diff lock, which needs a constant vacuum supply. Otherwise you blank it off. And this one, the left one, which is the higher of the three, is for the vacuum advance, so that's a timed vacuum. I'll go over setup of the mixture screws when we've finished fitting the needles and jets. The needles are located just under these covers here, so we'll just pop those off and pull the needles out. The reason we do this is because when we put the top back on the carburetor, you want the needles out, otherwise you run the risk of bending them. So you actually put the needles back in at the end. So I'll just pop these bits up here. So that's the needle and its holder. And then the orange spring underneath as well. So we don't change the springs, we leave them as standard as orange. The jetting kit that we can supply you, should you wish to have a play, you shouldn't really need to do. The jetting that we do is what we run on all of our engines, and we don't normally have to deviate away from that. You may find if you put an AFR gauge on your car and drive it down the road under certain throttle scenarios, you might think, oh, I could actually just tune this very slightly. And if you want to play around with that, then that's entirely your decision, and you're more than welcome to do so. And for that reason, we do a jetting kit which has different springs, needles, and jets, obviously. So with the needles removed, we'll then take the top off the carburetor without forgetting to undo these linkages first. So we've got a small R-clip there, which we're just going to pop off and not lose, and then take the linkage out. That is for the accelerator jet. You'll notice there's 3 positions for that. So we always install it and it comes out of the box in the center position. And what that does is when you actually go to accelerate, it gives a squirt of fuel over the primary chambers. There's no liquid in here, so you can't see it, but maybe when we're on an engine at some point we'll show that. So if you're finding it's bogging down when you're first punching the accelerator, you can adjust this accordingly to give a little bit more, a little bit less fuel. And then the second one is the choke lever here, so we'll just pop the R-clip out of that as well. Normally I'd be a different angle for this, it'd be a bit easier, but there we are.
I'm standing in your way.
Yeah, I know. Okay, that's the R-clips off and stored, so just pull the bars out. Okay, and then we'll spin the bolts out. So it's all of these Torx bits around the side here. They are T25s. So we'll just whiz them out. That's actually our holder for the choke mechanism as well. Oh, sorry, for the choke cable.
And now we're going to fast forward to where this is all done.
So with all of those removed, we can then just lift the top off. Roll it over. Obviously we've got the gasket on there, we've got our floats for each float bowl, and this is the actual pump mechanism for that accelerator jet. So as you accelerate, it pumps down and pushes on a spring in here, if you can see that, and squirts fuel up through these jets here. So I'll pop that to one side. We'll cover float bowl heights in a minute. The primary jets that we're changing sit under the needles, so probably easy for you to see this one here, Steve, and it's just here. And then the secondary jets, which very rarely change, are sat at the rear of the float bowl here. Did you get them?
I did.
Excellent. Okay, actually you can really nicely now see as well the vacuum section of the secondary. So this carburetor, as you go through accelerating, if I just raise it up slightly, first of all your primary's open, just on, I don't know if you can see my thumb there moving the accelerator, okay. So that's just the primary section there, and then as you accelerate further, the secondaries, if you go to the left side of the carburetor, there Steve, you can see the movement which is primary, and then it opens the secondaries. However, looking down through the top of the carburetor, even when the secondaries are open, that's still blanked off. So with this carburetor, which is really, really nice for the secondary fueling, it's also vacuum operated. So we've got these weights here. So the secondaries are only going to come on if A, your throttle pedal is down far enough to open the secondaries, and B, there's enough engine vacuum to actually open them, and obviously that's variable due to vacuum. Right, onto the jets. I don't have the right screwdriver, so just turn around and grab one. We can just spin these out. Obviously being very careful not to, I think the correct term is gnarl them up, would that be right?
That's the one that we can use, yeah.
Ah, the other one is the
one we can't use.
Yeah. So we'll just pop that out. Obviously the really nice thing with this carburetor is if this was on an engine and full of fuel, no problem, continue. You're just going to end up pulling the jet out of a bowl of fuel. You're not making a mess such as other carburetors where float bowls have to come off the side. So that's the jet from that side. And do the same this side. Effectively, when you're setting this carburetor up or doing any needle and jet changes, it is two carburetors joined together. That is how you have to treat it, hence the reason for changing both left and right needles and jets. Right, pop them there. We have our new jets here, which I will adjust. These are 80s. Very difficult to read the numbers on them. Not sure if your camera is going to pick them up, Steve. It might do. So this is 380. Now Edelbrock actually do a strange thing where they add a number to that. So what 380 actually means is 0.080. So the jets that were in there, I think 83s, 86s. 386, yeah, so they're 86s. So for 3.5, which is what we're jetting this carburetor for, we get 80s. So we'll pop them in and screw them down. So being very careful not to burr them or cross thread them. Just nip them up and then do the same this side. Okay, with that done, we'll now look at float bowl heights. Float bowl heights then, we'll need a 7/16 drill bit or piece of metal turned to 7/16 and another piece at 15/16 or 1 inch, either is fine, as per the manual recommends, and we must make sure the gasket is used for this operation as well. That's quite key. So you want the 7/16 drill bit when you're inverted like this to just raise or just touch the float bar like that. So I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I can hear it just scraping there. And then when we're on droop or on drop, you want the 15/16 or 1 inch to just come in contact with the end of the float bowl there. So to adjust this, this float is a little bit, it's actually high because we're inverted at the moment on where the chamber would be full of fuel. So we're just going to support the bracket here and give it a slight tweak. I think I've done that far too much. Oh no, I would say that's pretty much spot on. So we're just coming in contact with the end of the float. And then to adjust the droop, I'll just check this one first. As you can see, it's a mile off, a clear mile. We actually adjust the tab on the back here. So again, this is drooping too far, so we want to bend that tab into the carburetor. I am going to have to ask you to move for me to do this, Steve. Thank you. So just give it a little push. Always more difficult when you're being watched. Okay, we're not quite a mile off now, just 1/4 of a mile. Oh, we should do it metric, Steve. We should be in kilometres, shouldn't we?
No.
Okay. You're not quite enough. Obviously, once I've adjusted this one, I'm just going to go back and check that we haven't changed anything. Okay, so again, we're just coming in contact with that float just as we rub into, I don't know if can you see that?
Just about.
Yeah. Okay, so then going back to the 7/16 drill bit, just double check that. And again, we're just in contact, so that's spot on. So we can now place this back onto the carburetor body itself. So we'll just turn it over and sit it on top. So just making sure that everything goes where it's meant to go. And again, the key here is making sure that you do not have the needles in, because if you're pushing this in with the needles in, they've got to line up perfectly with the centre of the jet, and the chances of that happening if you're at a slight angle is slim to none, and you're going to end up bending the needle. So we'll pop the screws back in. I reckon time for a bit more fast forwarding. Those that watch Project Binky, that we both do, don't we? They would crack the funk out now, wouldn't they?
They would.
Yeah, I wonder who else watches Project Binky that follows and watches our videos and has made it this far into a carburetor jetting video that we've done to then hear us talk about Binky. Let's see. Comment below if you watch Binky. With that all bolted back in place, obviously making sure you put the choke cable bracket back in the correct place, orientation. I'm sure somebody's probably fitted it upside down at some point. We can next put the needles in. So we are going with, try and read the numbers off these, 6252. So 6252 needles on this for us, and we are replacing, the carburetor comes with, that's upside down, 6552s. So to change this over, there's just a tiny little spring here that holds it into position in a groove on the needle. So I'm just going to pull that down, remove the needle, select my new needle, and pop it through and put the spring into position. And then I'm going to put it straight into the carburetor with the spring, of course. They don't work very well without the springs. Drop it down into position, other way around, Thulian. Okay, so that's now in there, and then we'll just do the same with the other one. So that needle out, this needle in, and then drop it into the carburetor. Make sure it's moving smoothly when it's in position. There we go. Okay, and then just to double check, make sure you've still got the 6552 needles in front of you and that you haven't refitted them. Screw those covers back on. Which leaves the last two things, which are the two linkages. So this linkage fell out when I was playing around with the throttle here, so we'll pop that back in, and so actually it's that bracket down there, and then comes up to the centre port, and then get one of the tiny little R clips, assuming you haven't lost them.
At this point, I probably have.
Okay. Normally it happens when you're doing it on top of the engine, you go, ah, where's it gone? And then the choke lever as well, and the R clip for that. Okay, so that's our carburetor here jetted. I'm just going to raise it up, make sure that the throttle linkage all still works great, and then just make sure the throttle, the choke mechanism does as well. Another little thing here, the choke mechanism, that little bar that we put on purely activates this cam that raises the idle speed when you've got the choke on, so that's something, you know, there's a screw under here you can adjust just to raise the idle if you want that raising before, because at the moment it's pretty much on full choke only, whereas actually we find with these carburetors you want that to come on just a little bit earlier, because it's more the idle being raised you need than actually the choke plate being over the primaries. One thing that we do with our carburetor kits is we supply a fuel banjo, and the reason for that is when you these carburetors are supplied with a warning label saying not to use E85. That's fine, we're in the UK, we don't have much of that around, and your air cleaner will come down, and actually when you fit your rubber pipe on it will kink, which isn't very good. So we'll find a spanner for that, which I didn't prepare. Right, so we just pop that off. And then put the fuel banjo on that we supply. Again, if you're buying the carburetor kit from us, this will already be fitted. 2 little nylon washers there.
Hello.
And that goes onto the carburetor there. We will just nip it up because not all customers check that things like that are tight. So we'll just nip it up. And that's one carburetor jetted accordingly for a 3.5 litre engine, which this is being sent out to with one of our full kits. With the carburetor back together then, the last thing we just said we'd talk about is actually adjusting the base mixture screws. So what we normally do for starting with this is turn them all the way in. As I mentioned before, this is effectively 2 carburetors, so we have to treat it as so, in each screw the same thing happens on both screws. So that is all the way in there. I'll do the same with this one. And that is all the way in there. So both screw heads are not going to be pointing the same way. In fact, what we can do to make this a bit more obvious for the camera is just mark up. And our starting position for the mixtures is going to be 2 turns out. So we'll go 1 full turn out on this one, and 2, and then the same on here. It's always a bit more difficult when the carburetor's floating around. And 2. That will set us rich. So now with starting the engine, best thing for cold start on these is forget the choke, give them 2 pumps on the accelerator pedal, which will obviously put 2 squirts of fuel in, crank the key over, they will always fire straight away, assuming you've got, you know, your ignition timing correct. And then just hold the throttle up yourself while you're then setting your choke just to raise the idle up. Once you've got the engine warm, we'll then go to hydrocarbon CO meter. I've got an email that I email out to anybody that asks for it on how they then set these accordingly and set ignition timing on the road, etc. Again, that's part of the support you get from buying the package from RPi. I think that does us now, Steve.
Just about.
Unless we've forgotten something else.
We've forgotten to bolt it to an engine.
We'll do that next time. One last thing that we have forgot, Steve. We often get asked the question, you've only sent me 3 bolts to bolt the carburetor down, where's the 4th one? Well, with our kits we also supply a throttle cable with a bracket and a stud. So obviously your 3 bolts go round, and then your 4th bolt is actually a stud which will go into the manifold, and then, let me spin it around a bit more, Steve?
We're good.
Yep, and then that will sit over there like so, and the throttle cable will come up to the top of the throttle linkage here, pulling the throttle this way. Obviously there is some sprung tension here for the throttle, however this cable is supplied with a return spring as well. Lots of different ways you can do this, but obviously through the bottom hole here, assuming you're not using a auto kickdown linkage, is what I was going to say, down to a bracket off of here, off of a rocker cover bolt, anything you like, depending on what you've got on the front of the engine. You can come through this hole here, come off this way. Really, it depends on the setup and what you're doing. There's lots of variations there, but right, that is now the end of this video, Steve.
Are you sure?
You can go and edit it.
Sweet.